So what is Scratch? Scratch, in short, is a tool to help you develop apps without having to write any code. Those apps can be animations, games, interactive stories, or digital tools. Let's look at some examples. I'm going to click the See Examples button here, and then I'm going to head over to the Pico Show intro under Animation. Now this animation is going to show a character talk using a talk bubble, animate around, play sound, and change colors. So to start the animation, you can either click the green flag here or up here. So I'm going to click the green flag and start, and there's the character with the talk bubbles. And then the animation will continue and play sounds. So that's one type of a project that you could create with Scratch. It's also important to note that when you create a Scratch project, you can actually share it on the Scratch website, and other Scratch users can take and do what is called remixing to take your project and change it. Now that doesn't change your original project, but they basically save a copy of your project and can edit it however they want. Some of these projects, when you look at the descriptions of them, will even have remix ideas. For example, you could add other characters to the animation. So this just gives you some ideas of what you could do to remix this application. So I'm going to go back, and we're going to look at a couple more examples. One of the other ones I liked was Dress Up Tara. And in this one, it's more like a game. So there's the character here on the left side, and everything in here you can just drag and drop. So it's made to dress up this character. So if I wanted to make her into a superhero, for example, I can put on the cape and some of these goggles here, and there she is as a superhero. In this example, you could see that with Scratch, you can make a game, or maybe what you might consider a toy, using Scratch. If we scroll down, we see other sections like music and dance and stories. So you can make an interactive story if you wanted with Scratch. The last example I wanted to look at is the piano. And I kind of think of this piano as a toy that you could make with Scratch. So when you actually run the piano, you can tap on the keys to play the notes. If you want to, you can even use the slider to change the sound of the piano. So using Scratch, you can develop applications without using any code, and those applications can be games, animations, interactive stories, or digital toys. In order to make projects in Scratch, you're going to need to create a Scratch account. And as I mentioned earlier, creating a Scratch account is free. So you can click the button here to join Scratch, or you click the button over here. So find the button to join Scratch, and then you need to create a username. So I could create a username, for example, type in a password, and right now it's saying that username already exists because that's actually my username for Scratch. So you have to type in a password, confirm the password, and then click Next. And from there, you'd be asked to share the email address of an adult. And if you are an adult, you can just go through that whole process, and confirming your email address enables some other features in Scratch. But just create your username, your password, follow the steps by clicking through the Next button, and you can create your Scratch account and start building apps using Scratch. So I've logged into Scratch, and I can tell that I'm logged in because it says my username at the top of the screen. And from here, I'm going to create a new project. You can do that by clicking the Create button. So once you've gone there, you're taken into the Scratch development interface. Now here I see the name of my project, which is currently untitled. Now let's say I wanted to give this a name. I'll call this My First Project. And just like that, I've saved the name of my project. On the stage here, we have a cat. And this is the default project in Scratch. You have your little cat there. And this is the main working area. So if I were to publish this project and someone were to run it, this is what they would see. Now, it wouldn't really do anything because we haven't added any kind of interactivity to it. They just see a cat. But this is the main working area, and this is what users are going to see. And this is where we test our apps by clicking that green flag. And of course, we'll get more into that later. For now, I just want to introduce that this is the stage. Now, at the bottom, we have settings for adding new sprites, which are graphics. So this cat here would be considered a sprite in game development. We can add additional sprites, and we can change the background. In Scratch, the background is called a backdrop. So we have settings to change both the backdrop and the sprites. Now, in the center of the screen, we have a few different tabs. There's scripts, costumes, and sounds. If I go to costumes and I have the cat selected, I can see different costumes for the cat. In animation terms, these are called frames. So when I click on Costume 2, the cat goes to a different animation frame where he is walking. So I can click back between 1 and 2 and make it look like the cat is walking in place. We'll get more to this editing pane later on, but just know that this area on the right is broken up into different tabs, and you can click on them, and you're going to see something different based on which tab you have selected or which sprite you have selected down here. In the Sounds tab, we can see a sound. I have this meow sound effect, and when I click the play button, the sound effect will play. So I'll go back over to scripts. Now we're going to talk about scripts in a lot of detail later on, but for now, just understand scripts are where you apply the animations and interactivity to your apps. You can test out what scripts will do by clicking on them. So for example, there's this script right here that says move 10 steps. Now I have the sprite selected right here. I can see that it's selected because it has that blue box around it. So I have my cat selected. And if I want to test out this move 10 steps script, I can just click on it and he'll move 10 steps forward. So each time I click, cat moves forward a little bit. For now, you can just click on these and see what they do, but we're not actually going to build anything in particular just yet. Finally, I wanted to show that there's this toolbar at the top that allows you to modify your objects, like duplicate them, delete them, to make them grow or shrink, and then you also have a help button. And at the bottom of the screen is the backpack. Now, when I click that button to expand the backpack, that's that little arrow button, so it's down here, you just click it and open it up. I have the sprite one here, and then I also have another sprite in here, which you probably will not see. The backpack is a place where you can store objects for use in other projects. So let's say you draw something neat and you want to use it in a future project, you can put it in your backpack, and then it's accessible in all of your projects. We'll look more at how that works later. So for now, this is the Scratch interface. We have the stage, then we have backdrops and sprites over here, and then we have the tab sections which control our scripts, costumes, and sounds on the right side of the screen. Let's say you wanted to change the backdrop for your app. Now, for right now, I'm working in a project called Backdrops, which is actually just a blank new project. So if you want to follow along, you can create a new project, and you can do that by going to File, New, and you can name it Backdrops if you'd like. So here I have my sprite right here, and I want to change the backdrop. Now, on the left side, next to sprites, you can see that we have one backdrop on our stage. Now, if I click on that backdrop right here, you can see that it's selected because it has a blue rectangle around it. You'll notice that at the top of the screen, that tab that formerly said Costumes now says Backdrops. Now click on that tab. And that takes us to an interesting page. This page has our backdrops in a list. Now we only have one, so we only see one, but you can actually select the backdrop and you can paint on it using these painting tools. We'll look at the painting tools later on in the course, but just know that that's an option here for now. So how do we add a new backdrop? If you look at these buttons underneath New Backdrop at the bottom left, you'll see that we can choose one from the library. We can paint a new one, and that means we can use the painting tools to do that. We can get one from a file in our computer. So if you have a background image you want to bring in, you can just click that button, grab that image, and it'll come onto the stage. Or we can even use the camera to create a new backdrop. So that'll turn on your computer's webcam, and you can take a picture of your face if you want and put it in the background. For now, I'm just going to use the library. So I'm going to click the button to choose a backdrop from the library, and I'm going to pick one of these images. Now, these images are actually organized. So if you look at these and there's a lot to sort through and you want to just sort it to indoor images, you can click Indoors under the Category section. You can also follow the themes. So there's a castle theme and a flying theme, etc. So for now, I'm going to go back to Category All, and I'm going to choose Bedroom 2. So I'll click on that, and then I'll click OK, and there's the background. Now, if you look over at the right side of the screen in the Backdrops tab, you're going to see that this Bedroom 2 backdrop is selected. But I can also change it back to Backdrop 1 if I want by clicking on Backdrop 1. See, now it's a white backdrop. So we can switch between them. And in this example, let's say we're done using Backdrop 1. We know we're going to keep this room. And if you want to get rid of Backdrop 1, you just click on it, and then you just click that X at the top right, and there it goes, and we only have one backdrop now. Now, if I click and drag on the backdrop on the screen, it doesn't move. So a backdrop is a static or non-moving image that goes in the back. If I click to move the cat, he still moves. So I can set him down on the floor over there. And again, notice that when I click on the cat and move him, the backdrop changes back to the costume. So now that I have the cat selected, I see options for the cat here and not the backdrop. If I want the backdrop options back, I just simply click on the backdrop right here. So remember, if you want to change your backdrops, you can just click the buttons down here at the bottom to grab a new backdrop. And we chose one from the library, but you can create one however you'd like. And once you've selected a new backdrop, you can make sure that it's on the backdrop you want by going to the Backdrops tab. And if you don't see the Backdrops tab, just make sure that you have the stage selected at the bottom left corner of your screen. In a game, a sprite is a graphical asset. It's an image, just like this cat that we have on the screen. We can add new sprites in Scratch using the buttons over here. So we have this sprites list right here, and this is going to list all the sprites that are in our app. And if we want to add a new one, we can add one from the library, we can paint a new sprite, we can grab one from a file in our computer, or we can use our camera. Now these options may look similar because they are the exact same options that we looked at when we looked at making a backdrop. So let's look at adding a new sprite from the library. So I'm going to click this button right here, and the library pops up, and there's even more sprites built into Scratch than there are backdrops. So if you want to sort it, you can click Animals, for example, and you can choose an animal that you'd like to have in your app. So I'll go with Dog 2 right here, and then I'm going to click OK. And now I have a dog and a cat, and I can click and drag them around and move them however I'd like. Let's say I wanted to have the dog and the cat looking at each other. Well, I can do that. I'll put the cat on the left side and the dog on the right, and I want to make the dog face the cat. To do that, I'm going to click on Dog 2 down here in the sprite list, and then I'm going to click the Info button. It has the lowercase I. Now in here, I can actually change the name of the sprite. For now, I don't need to do that, so I'm going to leave it the same. And then what I'm going to do is actually change the rotation style. So right now, it's at this circular style. So if I change the direction by clicking and dragging here, make the dog rotate in a circle, I'll go back to 90, and I'm going to change the rotation style to this one, the left and right arrow. And when I do that, I can change the direction, and when I get on the left side over here, the dog faces to the left. So now I have a left-facing dog and a right-facing cat. You can also uncheck this box that says Show. So maybe you want a sprite to be hidden because you're not using it at the moment. You can just uncheck that box, and boom, your sprite is gone, but you still have it. So if I go back to my sprite list, Dog 2 is still there. I can always show it again by just checking that box. Now let's say I want to change my cat's name. I have Dog 2 and then I have Sprite 1. Well, let's say I wanted to change Sprite 1 to Cat. Well, select Sprite 1, click on the Info button, and change Sprite 1 to Cat. That's it. Click the back button, and there it is. I have Cat, and then I have Dog 2, which actually Dog may be a better name than Dog 2. So I'll just click the Info button, change it back to Dog, and there we go. Now, the cat's a little bit bigger than the dog, so what if we wanted to make the cat smaller and the dog bigger? Well, we can use these buttons at the top of the screen. Remember, we have the duplicate button, the delete button, grow, and shrink. So I'm going to click on grow, and then I'll click dog a couple times, and dog will get bigger. And then I'll click shrink, and then I'll click cat a couple times, and cat will get smaller. So now we have a giant dog and a tiny cat. So when you want to work with sprites, you have a number of tools at your disposal. You can add sprites using the button in the sprites list. You can change the settings for your sprites by using the Info button, and you can adjust the sizes of your sprites by using the buttons at the toolbar at the top of the screen. Painting applies to both backgrounds and sprites. Let's say we wanted to paint some shoes on our cat right here. To do that, I'm going to have my sprite selected in the sprite list, and then I'll head over to Costumes. And now I have Costume 1 and Costume 2, so I'm going to leave Costume 1 selected. And I'm going to zoom in by clicking the Zoom button right here, so I have a nice close view of the cat. And now what I want to do is draw some shoes on the cat. Now you may notice that this looks a little bit different than what we looked at earlier. Before we had the tools on the left side, and they were a little bit different from the tools on the right side. That's because right now we're in vector mode. If you're unfamiliar with vector or bitmap, you can think of it as vector being a mode where you draw using shapes. And bitmap is a mode where you draw using pixels. Pixels are the tiny rectangles that produce images on a computer screen. On many computer screens, there are a million or more of these pixels, so you don't usually notice them unless you're zoomed in really close. So for now we're in vector mode and we're drawing with shapes. So I want to draw some shoes, and for that I'm going to use an ellipse. So I'm going to click on the ellipse right here, and you can see that there's a suggestion here that if you hold shift, that you'll draw a circle. And now we can decide if we want to draw an ellipse with just a stroke on the edge or a filled in ellipse. And I want to draw a filled in ellipse, so I'm going to click the button right here. Now, if you do draw one that's just an outline, you can choose how big the outline is by dragging the slider right here. So I'll bring it down here, go back to this one, and then I'm just going to click and drag to draw a shoe on the cat. So there's one shoe. And then for the other shoe, I'm going to draw an ellipse just like this, and then I'm going to rotate it. So I want to rotate it, click and drag the circle. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a circle up above the ellipse. So I'm going to rotate it so it's on the same plane as his other foot, and then I'm just going to click and drag it into place. So now the cat has some fancy shoes on the screen. So if you look on the stage, all of those changes are then updated. Now we have a cat with fancy shoes. There are other drawing tools that we can use here as well. We can even add text. I can add a line, for example. So if I click on this line, I can choose how thick I want it. So I'll have it about that thick by using the slider down here at the bottom left of the painting area. And then I can click and drag to make some fine teeth for the cat. And now I'll drag to draw some more teeth. And that is one happy cat right there. You can also draw with the pencil. So I can click and drag and just draw some cool hand-drawn explosion or shining light effect on the cat. And there it is right there. And actually, I don't really like that much, so I can take it away by clicking the undo button. That's up here at the top. And then it's gone. And then we have this tool, which is reshape. And I could go to a part of the cat that I want to change. Like I can select his nose and then just click and drag to reshape it. And that looks a little bit weird too. So he has this gigantic nose now. So what I'm going to do is just undo that as well. And we have the selection tool, so I can select a part of the cat, move him around. So this whole cat is kind of grouped together. And now when I move him around, though, loses his shoes and his awesome teeth. So let's move him back to where he was. Here I can also flip left or right. There we go. So in addition to using the rotating options that we looked at earlier by clicking on the info button, we can rotate left and right by doing this. We can flip him left and right, or horizontal and vertical by clicking these buttons here. Let's go back to normal. So I can add rectangles using the rectangle, and if we hold shift, then it constrains to a square, just like holding shift with the ellipse tool constrains to a circle. I'll undo that as well. And we have the text tool, so I can click on that, and then click anywhere with my mouse, type out some text, and then click away to commit the change, and there's our text. I'll delete that with the delete key on my keyboard. And we have color a shape, so if we want to change the color of a cat, and then we can duplicate something. So I can just click on something and then click and drag it and duplicate it. So I'll delete that shape, select it, there we go. And then if we want to change the color, let's say we want to change the color of the cat's fancy shoes to be purple shoes, we can just click on them and change it like that. If you hover over lines, you'll see that you can change the color of lines too. So we can change the color of lines and shapes. So I can even change the color of the cat's fur like that. So now we have a purple cat. And of course, if you don't like that, you can just undo and step backwards. So to review, vector mode means that you're drawing with shapes. And when you have a sprite on the screen, if you want to edit in vector mode, you're going to select the costume for the sprite under costumes, and then you can use the vector paint tools to draw shapes on top of or modify the existing shapes of your sprites. Now let's look at using the bitmap tools. Remember that the difference between painting a vector graphic and a bitmap graphic is that vector uses shapes and a bitmap uses pixels. To paint a vector or a bitmap graphic for a sprite or a backdrop, you just simply click the paint button. So if we want to paint a new sprite, we click the button here to paint a new sprite. And if we want to paint a new backdrop, we click the button here to paint a new backdrop. I'm going to click to paint a new sprite. Let's say we want to make a happy face. Now I want to point out that when you're drawing with a bitmap, the tools are on the left side. And if you look at the bottom right of the editor here, you're going to see that we're in bitmap mode. But if you want to change to vector mode, watch where the tools go. So now we have vector mode and the tools go to the right. So we do have a different set of tools on the left and on the right. So let's go to the left by clicking convert to bitmap. And you may notice that we also have lines and rectangles and ellipses and text on this side. And there is one important difference. When you create a shape in vector mode, that shape stays as an independent unit. So the ellipse is always an ellipse. And if you click on the ellipse, you can change its color, you can move it around, you can resize it. In bitmap mode, when elements overlap, they become one single element. So let's look at how that works. I am going to create an ellipse. So I'll click on the ellipse tool, and then I'm going to click on the yellow color to make a face. And I'll click and drag, and I'll hold shift on my keyboard to make a circle. So there's our circle. Let's say I want to make a face with eyes and a mouth. So I'll click on black right here, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm on just fill only. So I want to be on the filled in ellipse setting. And then I'm going to click and drag. There's eye number 1. And then eye number 2. And then here will be our mouth over here. So I'm just clicking and dragging to create them. And the mouth is kind of surprised. So there is our face. And I'll click away to commit the change. And you can see it updated on the left side of the screen over here on the stage. And I can just drag the sprite around. And I've actually already created a custom sprite using the paint tools. Now, here's where we can see the difference. Watch what happens when I use the selection tools. So there's this select tool over here. And if I click it and then I just click and drag a selection window that covers the whole shape, that's going to select this area. And then I can click and drag it and I can rotate it and I can scale it. I have those same tools. So far, it seems kind of similar. Well, watch what happens when you select something that's not the whole shape. Let's just select the left half of the face and then pull it apart. So because we're working with pixels, we have that option. So things get cut up when you don't select the entire thing. We actually also don't have the option to just click on a shape and move that shape. Well, we actually kind of have that option, and I'll show you here the difference. I'll click the button to undo, get us back to where we were before. So let's say we want to delete that left face. That shouldn't be showing. That should have been deleted when I clicked undo. So I'm going to highlight that extra part of his face, and then I'm going to erase it using the eraser tool. So I'm going to click on erase. I'm going to make the tool large so we have this big width for the eraser, and then I can just erase like that. There we go. That looks fine. So we can also add things like text. We can draw lines, and we can use a brush, and we can paint. So you can hand draw that. You can select something and duplicate it. I'm going to undo that. I'll select and duplicate. Just select this face, duplicate it. There we go. I've duplicated that face. So we can use these tools to create more complex sprites. So that's an overview of drawing with bitmaps. It is kind of similar to working with a vector, except for that shapes don't stay as individual entities. Once you overlap certain parts, they stick together. Now, you may want to use that for some cases, and for other cases, you may want to use vector shapes. It all depends on your preference. Let's say you wanted to take something that you've made a change to, for example, and use it in another project. Let's look at how that works right here. So I'm going to create a new sprite from the library, and let's go to bananas. So I'll select the bananas, and then I'll click OK, and there's some bananas right there. Now let's say I want to make them a different color. I want to make them brown bananas. And then I want to save that because I want to use it in a different project. And also I want to make them a little bit bigger. So I'll click the grow button. Click on the bananas a few times. Then we have the large bananas right there. And then I'll go over to costumes. And I'm now in vector mode. And so I want to change the color of the banana. So I'm going to click on this color a shape button. And then I'm going to click on brown. And then change the bananas to be brown. So now we have some brown bananas. And so I want to recycle these and use these in another project that I'm working on. Maybe you're making a game and you've made the brown bananas or whatever you want to customize. Maybe you've painted this and you want to use it in something else. Now that's where the backpack comes into play. We've discussed the backpack briefly so far, but let's look at how it actually works. So I'll open up the backpack. And again, you might not see this sprite That's an apple in there, but you can drag the bananas in there by just clicking, and it's dragging right into the backpack when you've opened up the backpack, and then it'll save into there. So we see Sprite bananas. And now what I'm going to do is create a new project. So I'll go to File, New, and I'll call this Backpack 2. And in here, I can use the banana. See, I don't have them in my sprite list, but I do have them in my backpack. So if your backpack's hidden again, you can always show it, and you should see the bananas there. And then we can just drag the bananas onto the screen, and they're the same size that they were when we saved them to the backpack, and they have that same color saved. So if you want to save objects to your library, just click and drag them right into your backpack, and then you can use them in other projects. One of the features that I really like about Scratch is that it's easy to get help to figure out how to do things on your own. One of the ways to do that is by using this button at the top of the screen. So it says Block Help, and if I click on that, and then I click on the stage, for example, then I see the project editor map in here that explains the stage and how it's organized and what the different areas are called. You also see the cursor tools to duplicate and delete, grow, shrink, and get tips. Now, in this help panel right here, you can actually click this home button to go to all tips. And if it's closed ever, you can access it by using the question mark, or you can click the question mark all the way on the right side of the screen to open up as well. So from here, you just click that home button where it says all tips. And then we have these different categories, step by step, how to, and blocks. So if you need any kind of information about how to do something in Scratch, I recommend starting with step by step. Then you have this little tutorial about getting started with Scratch. And if you click that, you'll have a whole tutorial that explains how to do all the different steps in building a Scratch project. So you can click begin, and you can go through the tutorial, and it has animations for you to follow along to learn how to do a certain project in Scratch. So I'll click back, and then I'm just going to go to all tips again. And then under how to, we can look at how to make a game. And then we can get some information about how to use the arrow keys to move, how to bounce around, how to collide, how to keep score, etc. So you can get tips on how to build the type of app that you want to build through the how-to section. And under blocks, you can find information about the different scripting blocks. Now, of course, we haven't gone really far into scripting, but if you wanted to see more detailed descriptions of something, either now or after the course or during the course, you can find the tool that you're interested in and then click the button there to expand it and find information about how to use it. So I clicked on Move Steps, and it explains that the character moves a certain number of steps. Then we have a detailed description of how the steps work. So if you ever need help in Scratch, you want to learn how to do something you don't quite know how to do, open up this tips section on the right side of the screen, and you can get the tips that you need to build the kind of app that you want to build. Scripts are what give life to your apps. Using scripts, you can apply movement to your characters. You can respond to events, like when a character is clicked on, or when a button is pressed on the keyboard, or when your mouse moves. You can add sound effects, and that's what's going to give the life to your applications. Now, in order to apply scripts, you're going to need to be on the scripts panel. You're also going to need to have the sprite selected that you want to apply scripts to. So we want to apply scripts to our cat, so he's selected there. And then what we do is we start with some kind of event, usually. So I'm going to click on the Events section. And I'm going to choose when the flag is clicked. So this is what's going to trigger whatever scripts that we apply. So I'm going to click and drag this right in here. Now this area is where you place the scripts that you want to apply. So as soon as we start running the app, then the scripts that we attach to this are going to run. So let's go back to motion. Now motion deals with those scripts that move or rotate your sprites. For example, let's click and drag this move 10 steps out here. Notice at the top of this script that there's a little notch. Now that aligns perfectly with the shape of this event. So if I click and drag this action up here, you'll see that thick white line underneath when green flag was clicked. When you see that thick white line, release your mouse button. That's going to snap right into place. So now, in order to test this, I actually have to click the green flag to run the app. So I'm going to click the green flag now, and the cat moves. So each time I click the green flag, the cat moves. So now, when we run our app, we're actually finally doing something. Now, one thing that's neat is that we can actually apply multiple actions. For example, if we wanted to move and then point in a particular direction, we can do that by clicking and dragging point in direction out. And you can just drag it right underneath move 10 steps. And then what will happen when you click the green flag is that he'll move 10 steps and he'll point in the direction 90 degrees. Now, that's actually going to be facing right. So if we want to make the cat face in a different direction, we need to change 90 degrees to something else. Now, when I click that down arrow next to 90, you'll see that 90 degrees is right, and then negative 90 is left, 0 is up, and 180 is down. So you can choose one of these that's not right, like 180, and then click the green flag. He'll move 10 steps and then face down. Now, it's important to note that we don't see these separately. We don't see him move 10 steps and then a pause in time and then face down. And that's just important to understand how these movements or actions are calculated. So he moves to the right first, and this is before the screen is updated even. So this is happening behind the scenes. He moves to the right, then he faces downward, and then the stage is refreshed, and then we see what the result of those actions happening. Now, if we wanted to have a pause in between them, we could apply another script that we'll look at later to add that pause. So at this point, if you want to, you can play around with the different scripts in the motion section and move them around. Before you do that, I want to show you one more thing that's important, and that is moving or rearranging scripts. Let's say we wanted to flip, move 10 steps, and point in a direction. What we could do is just click and drag point in direction and just disconnect it to move 10 steps. And then I can click and drag move 10 steps. So one thing that's really important to know is that if you're dragging the bottom node, you're going to disconnect it. But if you're dragging the top node, everything will move as a single unit. So I can detach move 10 steps by dragging that script by itself. I can put point in direction back, and then I can put move 10 steps back, and then the direction will change first, and then the cat will move. So we can reorder actions, you just have to know how to take them apart. And again, I encourage you to experiment with these motion actions to see if you can make something interesting. The looks scripts are made for changing the look of your sprites. You can make them say something with a talking bubble, or think something with a thinking bubble. You can show or hide your sprites, you can change their costumes, you can change the backdrop, you can change colors, etc., etc. So let's look at how these actions work. Let's say I want the duck to quack. I'm going to go to events, and then I'm going to drag out when this sprite clicked. So this is an event that's going to trigger when we click on this particular sprite. Let's go back to looks, and then we want to run a script when that event occurs. So I can click and drag this one that says say hello for 2 seconds. I can drag it right underneath when this sprite clicked. You'll see that thick white line, and then you can release the mouse, and it should snap into place. Now, there's a difference between say hello for 2 seconds and just say hello. When you choose just say hello, the talk bubble is going to appear on the screen, and it's going to stay there. So if you want it to go away after a certain amount of time, you're going to choose the for 2 seconds. Also important to note, actions that take a certain amount of time are going to update the screen before the next action occurs. So if we say hello for 2 seconds, and then we go over to motion, and we have the character move, well, he's going to say hello and then move. So let's actually look at how that works. I'm going to make the duck quack. And I don't need to do it for 2 seconds, maybe just 1 second. So when the sprite is clicked, he's going to quack for 1 second. There we go. Quack, quack. All right, it's looking good. So now we want the duck to quack and then move. So I'll go to motion, and then I'll take this move 10 steps script, drop it right underneath quack, and then I can click on the duck, quacks, and then he moves. Quack, and then move. Let's go back to looks. So under looks, you're also going to see think, which is the same thing as say, except for it uses a thinking bubble instead of a talking bubble. So I can click and drag out think for 2 seconds, and then click on the duck, and you'll see that. Quack, move, think. So we can change costumes, we can change the color of an object. So I can just click and drag this one out, click on the duck, and at the end, he'll change color a little bit. And now he's a green duck. And then maybe he can say he doesn't like that color and then change back to normal. So I can just click and drag, say hello for 2 seconds out there, and then type, instead of hello, I don't like this. Say that for 1 second, and then I'm going to drag out clear graphic effects. So I'll just click and drag that, and that should clear the color change. And now what's interesting here is the color effect. We have these 2 different ones. There's change color effect by, and then set color effect to. So he's green now, and he's going to stay green, and when the change color effect by 25 is, he's going to change to a different color. Also, when you look at color, you're going to see a drop down. If you click on that, we can apply these different effects. Maybe I want to apply pixelate. So we can change the pixelate effect by 25. So instead of changing colors, he's going to pixelate, and then he's going to say, I don't like this, and then the effects are going to go away. So let's see what happens. He quacks, he thinks, he gets pixelated, he doesn't like it, turns back to normal. You can also use these to change the size of your sprites. You can use them to bring them in front or in back of other sprites, and you can have them go back one layer. So that means go in back of the sprite that's right behind them. So you have all of these options with the look settings. And again, just like with other scripts that you can apply in Scratch, I encourage you to play around with these and see what you get. Events scripts allow you to respond to things that happen. For example, when the green flag is clicked, when a key is pressed, when the sprite was clicked, etc. Using these events, you can add interactivity to your applications. Let's say, for example, that we wanted to move the ladybug here on the screen with the keyboard. Well, we know that we're going to need to respond to the 4 directional buttons at least. So I'm going to drag out 4 of these when key pressed events. Just like this. And I'm going to need to handle up, down, left, and right. So in the drop down where it says space in the top left one, I'm going to click that arrow and I'm going to choose the up arrow. And to the right of that, I'm going to choose down arrow. And then I'm going to do left and right as well. So left there and then right there. So we want to respond when the key is pressed. The first step is actually turning the sprite in the right direction. To do that, we'll go over to motion and we'll use the point in direction script. So I'm going to click and drag this over to when right arrow key pressed. Now, if you press right on your keyboard, you're not going to see anything right now because 90 degrees is facing right. And you can tell that because next to 90, there's a drop down here. And you can click that little flyout menu and you can see that 90 is right, negative 90 is left, 0 is up, and 180 is down. So let's apply these point in direction actions to the 3 other arrow keys. So I'm just dragging out the same one, point in direction under each of the arrow keys. And I'm going to change the up arrow one using the drop down to 0, which is up. And then down will be 180. And then left arrow will be negative 90. So now when you push an arrow on the keyboard, you should see the ladybug face in the appropriate direction. So in order to move with the keyboard control, we actually need to make the sprite move. Now, based on what we've done so far, we could actually just drag out something like this move 10 steps action and then press the right key on the keyboard, and that would work. And we could apply the move 10 steps action to each of these. But what if at some point you decided to change how many steps you wanted to move in each key press? Well, if you did that, you'd have to change that number 4 times. There has to be a better way. Well, guess what? There is. So what I'm going to do is disconnect this move 10 steps script, and then I'm going to head back over to events. We're going to look at a different kind of event. And this event is called a broadcast. A broadcast is an announcement that something has happened. So after the ladybug turns, we're going to broadcast that the ladybug turned. And then what we're going to do is respond to the broadcast using when I receive. So let's look at how that works. I'm going to head over to here in the events and grab broadcast message 1. And I'm going to click the drop down and I'm going to click new message. Now you can of course leave it at message 1, but that's not very descriptive of what has happened. I'm going to name this message done turning. And I'm going to click OK. So now it says broadcast done turning. And so what I'm going to do is just drag this right under point in direction 0 for up arrow. And then we're going to do the same thing for the down, left, and right arrow keys. So we want to change that drop down for broadcast to done turning. And I'm going to change it in here in the scripting area before I drag it out. And then I can easily just drag it out without having to change it multiple times. So there we go. So when an arrow key is pressed, the ladybug's going to turn and then say, I'm done turning. Now we need to respond to that action. So when I click and drag this one out, when I receive message 1, I'm going to change message 1 to done turning, and then put move 10 steps underneath there. So each time a key is pressed, the message is going to be broadcasted. So done turning, turn to the right direction, done turning, turn, then done turning, etc. And then whenever done turning happens, we're going to move 10 steps. So now I can use my keyboard to control the ladybug. And now if I want to change the speed at which the ladybug moves, I can change the 10 in move 10 steps to, for example, 25. And now I can easily move the ladybug faster. So using these different kinds of events, we can respond to user interaction, like key presses on the keyboard. We can also respond to when the application starts, or when the green flag was clicked. We can respond to the loudness changing, or using this drop-down, a timer's value changing, or the video motion. We can respond when the background changes. And we can respond to messages that are received or broadcasted so that we can recycle our scripts and not have to place the same script extra times into our applications. The pen scripts allow you to draw on the screen. So let's say here we have our Ladybug app that moves around with key presses on the keyboard. Let's say we wanted to have the Ladybug trace a path as she moves. So here is a little app we created in another movie. So if you're wondering how these scripts work, you can look in the previous movie and check that out. So what I want to do is make the pen draw. Now if you go to the pen scripts, you're going to see clear, and that's going to clear everything that's been drawn with a pen. Stamp creates copies of an object. So if we told this ladybug to stamp, like I can click this right here, and then drag the ladybug over, and there's a copy of the ladybug. And now this stamp is not a separate sprite. I can't drag it out. I can only drag this one. So stamps create just a visible copy, but not a new interactive sprite. And again, we can erase those by just running the clear script. So I click clear, and the extra ladybug goes away. Now pen up and pen down do what you might expect, just like putting a pen on a piece of paper. That's when you're going to start drawing, and pen up is going to release the pen from the stage. So when we want to draw, we put the pen down. When we're done, we take the pen up. The set pen color script works maybe not how you'd exactly expect it. When you click on the little color swatch, you can then move your mouse over any color you see on the screen, and that's what you can change the color to. So I can use this blue from sensing right there, click on that, and then I can use set pen color to blue. So I can have it do that, or you can use change pen color by and change the color by a certain amount. This will enable you to make something like a rainbow, or you can set the pen color based on a number value. You can change the pen shade, and you can change the pen size as well. So let's say we want the ladybug, since it has rainbow colors all over it, to paint a rainbow pen stroke. So I'm going to mess with when I receive done turning, and I'm going to disconnect move 25 steps. And remember, to disconnect, you want to drag from the bottom node, not the top node. So the top node's going to take everything with it that's connected, but if I drag the bottom node, it's going to disconnect from the thing above it. So I'll move the move 25 step script over here and drop it, and then the first thing we're going to do is put the pen down. So when the arrow keys are pressed, the ladybug will turn, the pen will then go down, and then we could run change pen color by. Now I have 10, I'm just going to leave the default there, that's fine. And then I'm going to move 25 steps. And then finally I'll lift the pen up. Now I am putting the pen up script right here, but you actually don't need it for this example because we're just always going to be drawing with the ladybug, but it's a good habit to be in to use pen up when you're done drawing so you don't accidentally have a sprite keep drawing after you don't want it to draw. So with these actions all set up, I'm going to use my keyboard, and the ladybug draws a rainbow color. You can even hold the key down. So to review, you can use the pen scripts to draw on the screen. If you want to change colors, you have options to do that as well. You can change the pen size if you want. You can choose when you want the pen to go down or come up, and you can erase everything you've drawn with the pen using the clear script. Using the control scripts, you can do several different types of tasks. Control involves running commands repeatedly, waiting for a certain amount of time, running if-then statements that check to see if something is true, and if it's true, then you can run a command, and you can run a command if it's not true if you want. And control also controls clones. Clones are copies of a sprite. So let's look at how some of that works. So on the screen here, I have a wizard and a lightning bolt. You may notice that I've shrunken down the lightning bolt a little bit and rotated it so it looks like it's coming out of the wizard's magic wand. So what we want to do is click the wizard and have the lightning bolt launch out. So let's start with just having a lightning bolt move. So what I'm going to do is inside of the control section, I'm going to drag out with the lightning bolt selected the forever script. So this is going to run commands forever. As soon as it gets to the end, it's going to loop back to the beginning and repeat these commands over and over again. There's also the repeat command that allows you to repeat something a certain number of times. So for the lightning bolt moving, we actually want this to move forever. So what we want to happen forever is the lightning bolt to go to the right. So I'm going to go to motion, and I'm not going to use move 10 steps. Now the reason why is if I just drag this out and show you real quick, I'll put move 10 steps inside of the forever loop. And if I click forever, it's going to go up instead of to the right because I've rotated the lightning bolt. So I need to stop this, and then I'll move the lightning bolt back into place right here. And then I'm going to take out move 10 steps and just drop it in this scripting area, and it'll go away. So what I want to do is find change x by, and I'm just going to leave it at the default of 10 and drag that in. So this is going to happen forever. And if I click where it says forever, we can see that lightning bolt move to the right instead of up. So that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to stop the app and then move the lightning bolt back now. So we have this block, this forever block. And what we want to do is each time we click the wizard, we want to create a new lightning bolt and have that lightning bolt shoot forward. So we have this forever action down here. Let's go back to control. And in here, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to drag this over here. So it says when I start as a clone. That's the one that we want. So I'm dragging that out. And what we need to do now actually is hide this sprite because we don't want to show the initial one, but we want to show it whenever we create a clone. So we'll also need to handle the event when green flag is clicked. So when the green flag is clicked, we're going to hide the lightning bolt. And when it's created as a clone, we're going to show it because we don't want to have it showing right now. We want to have it showing only when the wizard is shooting them. So I'm going to go over to looks and I'll drag out a hide under when green flag clicked, and I'll drag out a show under when I start as a clone. Now, when we start as a clone, we also want to make sure that the lightning bolt is in this position where it is right now. And when I hover over the center of the lightning bolt, you'll see that that's x negative 46. I'm looking in this bottom right area of the stage here. It says x negative 46, y negative 9. Now, if I go over to motion, it's going to give me this action, go to x and y. And actually, what that does is it defaults to the position of the sprite currently. So we actually don't need to write that down and plug that in here. We can just grab go to x and y and just drag that underneath show. So the lightning bolt's going to show when it's created as a clone, and then it's going to go to a certain position. And then we want it to move forever. So I'm just going to drag that forever loop right under there. And that's really all the logic that we need. We just need to say to create a clone of the lightning bolt when we click on the wizard. And to do that, we're going to have to actually go over to the wizard. So I'm clicking on the wizard in the sprite section. And now we need to write some simple wizard scripts. So go over to events, drag out when this sprite is clicked, and then go to control. And at the bottom of control, we want to create a clone of something. So I'm going to just click and drag that out under when this sprite clicked. And then I'll use the drop down to choose lightning. So whenever we click on the wizard, it's going to create a clone of the lightning bolt. And when the lightning bolt clone is created, it's going to run the show, it's going to move into position, and then it's going to change its x by 10 forever. So let's see what we get when we click the green flag. So there, the lightning bolt has gone away, and now when we click on the wizard, he shoots the lightning bolts. So I'll stop the app now. So to review, the control scripts are there to control the flow of your application. You can control what happens when an object starts as a clone. You can control a looping action, whether it runs a certain number of times with a repeat or whether it runs forever. You can wait a certain amount of time before you perform something. You can do if-then statements, and you can manage all of your clones as well. Sensing scripts are there to detect information. If you look at them, you'll notice that they're different shaped from most of the other scripts that we've looked at. If you look at the motion script, most of these scripts are semi-rectangular with rounded edges and with notches on the top and the bottom. But the sensing scripts have pointed edges. And they're hexagons for the most part, but there's also these circular ones. The scripts that are hexagons are for putting inside of the control if, then, else statements. So you can see those hexagon shapes are right there. So these are values that are true or false. And then we also have these rounded ones, and the rounded ones are values. These will give us, for example, maybe a number value. Notice that at the end of the hexagonal shapes, you're going to see a question mark. So it's evaluated as true or false. And it's then plugged into an if statement. So let's just see an example of that now. So here we have a very simple app, and I'm going to click the run button to get it going. And I'll click the wizard, and he shoots lightning bolts at the dragon. Now we've looked at how to create the logic of this in a previous movie. So we have the wizard, when the sprite's clicked, he creates a clone of lightning, and the lightning hides when the green button is clicked, and then when it starts as a clone, it shows, goes to a position, and then moves to the right forever. The dragon does not have any logic, but I have flipped him to the left. So let's say what we want to do is have the wizard shoot a lightning bolt at the dragon, and when the lightning bolt hits the dragon, the lightning bolt disappears, and the dragon says something. So using the sensing actions, we can actually respond to when one object is touching another object. So with the dragon selected, I'm going to head over to Control, and then I'm going to drag out an if-then block. So it has that hexagon shape in there, so we're going to need something that is that shape to put in there. It's going to be evaluated as true or false. Let's go back to sensing, and the one that we want is touching just with the drop down. So let's drag that in, and then I'm going to drag it by the left edge, and then hover that left edge over that hexagon, and when the hexagon is highlighted, I'll release my mouse button, and it'll fit nicely where it's supposed to. So you can use this drop down to get existing objects. For example, lightning. But you can also get your mouse pointer or the edge of the screen. So I'm going to choose lightning. So if the dragon is touching lightning, then it's going to run whatever scripts we put inside of this if block. Well, if the dragon's touching lightning, then we want the lightning to disappear. And we want the dragon to say that he has been hit. So in order to tell the particular lightning bolt that hit the dragon that that lightning bolt has hit the dragon, we're actually going to need to broadcast an event. So let's go over to events, and then go to broadcast message 1. Drag that out, and you can actually just drag it into the if statement. And instead of message 1, I'm going to create a new message, and this is going to say, bolt hit dragon. So hit OK. So when the bolt hits the dragon's going to broadcast that message. So now the lightning bolt's going to need to respond to that message. So let's head over to lightning, and then I'm going to find when I receive, and right now it's saying bolt hit dragon, but if you don't see that, you can just click the drop down, and then you can choose bolt hit dragon. So bring that in there, and when bolt hits dragon, we want to delete the clone. So we'll go over to clone, and then just drag delete this clone right under there. So right now, we should be able to hit the green flag and start running this, and click the wizard, and if we look at the lightning bolts, they actually don't do anything when they hit the dragon, and I want to show you why that's happening. So I'm going to hit the stop button, and then head back over to the dragon. So we do have this if statement right here. So we have this block that's checking to see if the dragon's touching the lightning. But we actually need to be running it all the time. So we're going to need to put it inside of a forever loop. So I'll just drag out a forever loop. And when you drag it by the if statement, it'll try to swallow the if statement, and that's exactly what we want. So we're putting it inside that forever loop. And then we're going to attach that to a when green flag was clicked event. So now it's always going to be checking that. So if we don't wrap it in some kind of a loop, or we don't check it multiple times, this is only going to run one time. Or not at all, because it wasn't attached to any kind of event. So this was just floating in space. So now we wrap it in that forever loop so it runs over and over again all the time. And we also start running that forever loop when the green flag was clicked. So we should be able to click green flag now, and then click on the wizard. And then when a lightning bolt hits the dragon, the lightning bolt disappears. So the sensing objects give us values. Some of those values are evaluated as true or false, or an answer to a yes or no question. Is the lightning bolt touching the dragon? You can use the drop-down menus or the color swatches to choose if an object's touching a particular color, or if an object's touching another object, and you can respond however you want using the control statements. The sensing options also have these rounded options that give us number values that we can use, and we'll look at later on.